Hello and welcome to this tutorial on simulating daylight availability with ClimateStudio. Eventually we'll be getting to this output and I'll be explaining how to understand daylight availability, useful daylight illuminance, and all kinds of interesting metrics around it. For this tutorial we're going to start with looking at a workflow for setting up your daylight availability runs, and in the next tutorial we'll talk about how to look at the results. So this is going to follow this documentation on the Solema website, but is also going to supplement with some tips and tricks and help you understand how to get started. So I've got this model already made, but I haven't started to set this up for daylight availability. So let's do that together here. I'm going to go to daylight availability, and you'll see that the tabs now are a little bit different than some of the ones we've used in the past. There's still the climate, the north offset, and we still have to set those. But now there's not a point in time sky conditions tab, because for this set of simulations, we're going to be looking at the full annual simulation hourly across the entire year. So we don't just pick one, we've got them all. We set the materials same way as we've done previously. Nothing very complicated here, except we will get into how to set dynamic shades in a little bit. And this is a new part of this analysis, is going to be defining some analysis planes. And these planes are commonly work planes. In the case of our gallery and reading room, we're going to use the floor as a proxy for how much light is around the space. This is kind of an imperfect proxy, but I hope it's a straightforward way of sort of getting into this set of simulations and understanding the nuance of it. The analysis zones we're going to select are going to be each of the individual floor plates inside the galleries and the reading room. And so I'm actually not interested in the ones that won't get any daylight whatsoever, like the elevator lobby here or underneath the stairs. So I'm going to have to trim this floor material in order to come up with a useful analysis zone. To do this, I'm going to, in my analysis tab here, I'm going to add a layer called zones. And maybe I'll make this red so I can see it a little better, what's going on. And I'm going to copy this floor to there. I'm going to copy these two while I'm at it. And I'm going to turn off the base, so I'm just looking at those. Okay, so those are my analysis zones. The first thing I want to do is check the normals on these. So to do this, select it and type DIR. That's the direction of the normal. In this case, it's facing up, which is the direction the sensors will be facing. So that's good. That's what we want. Test this one, and they're all good. So for this one, this zone here, I actually want to define it based on this geometry. So I'm going to take, oops. So I'm just drawing this line across in order to make sure I've intersected my surface there, and then I'm going to extrude this just to make sure I'm fully intersecting that analysis plane, and then I'm going to trim it. So the cutting objects are these guys, and I'm going to trim that back, and then I can delete these. And then for this one, just making sure that, yeah, so it's okay on this edge. I actually want these to be the same plane. I don't want two separate ones, so I am going to Boolean these together, Boolean two objects, and hit enter, and now it will be one object. So I can click on this and click on this and add those zones. I'm just going to press OK. We can edit this later, and you'll see that This is zone 10 and this is zone 11. They're automatically ID'd there. So 11 I'm going to call reading. Oops, I'm going to spell it right. And 10 I'm going to call sculpture. And I'm going to have different criteria for both of these. So I've got the area of the analysis plane. I've got the spacing of my nodes, which is 0.6 meters between, about 2 feet between each node. That seems reasonable for this particular analysis. This tells me how many sensors there are. So I've got approximately 800 sensors, 750 sensors here. This tells me the schedule. I'm going to keep 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. with daylight savings. And this tells me the minimum target and maximum amount of light that I'd like to have. You'll see how this comes back later when we talk about useful daylight illuminance. But for now, for the sculpture gallery, I think I'm going to edit this so the target illuminance, lux, would be something around 100 lux. Say on an overcast day, I'd be perfectly fine with that. And I'm going to keep 3000 lux as the excessive amount. Although honestly, since we're fine with having direct beam in there, maybe 3000 is too small. Maybe I should do more like 5000. And then supplemental lux would be any useful light that is still not really meeting this 100 lux target. So maybe I'll put 50 in here just for the sake of it. By the way, just for future reference, the occupancy can be changed really easily. There's a whole bunch of different occupancies built into this, into ClimateStudio. For this class, let's just use the 8 to 6 with daylight savings. For the reading room, the criteria seems actually pretty reasonable. For much of the reading room, probably I would want to have at least 100 lux as my target. In some areas I might want 300 for reading. I'm going to keep it at 300 there. And probably 3000 is a good target for the excessive lux. And I'll keep 100 as supplementary. So good. So we've defined our analysis planes downstairs. Now we're going to go upstairs. Why is this not going upstairs? Oh, because I don't have any of those layers on. There we go. So upstairs, I need to define my analysis planes. I'm going to repeat this process again. So copy the object to the layer. I'm going to turn off the base layer so I can just see that one. And actually, I want to divide this so I have two different zones, one on each side of so one for the paintings and one for the photos. So I'm going to also make sure that I can split this. And instead of trimming, I'm going to split this zone. So set objects to split is that. And then I'm going to split with that. So now I should have two separate ones like that. And I'm going to check my normals. Oops, I accidentally just deleted that. There we go. Check the normals. Now, these normals are facing the wrong way. They're facing down. So to flip them, I press F, and now they're facing up. If you accidentally realize or get a run simulated and it says it's all 0, there's no light in there, that might be a good reason why it got messed up. Your normals are facing the wrong way. So I'm going to take those two and add them, and it automatically adds two separate zones because they're two planes. And so 13 is photos and 12 is paintings. And so for these guys, for paintings, I want to have excessive, let's put this at 500. I know in the assignment I said 300, but maybe that's a little bit too difficult. And I'm going to lower the supplementary in there. And then in photos, the actual target is 0. And so in some ways this is kind of a not applicable since it's not supposed to be a daylighted zone, but we'll see. So excessive lux, maybe we is anything over above 100 lux, the target being 10 and supplement 3 being 5. Let's do that and see what it looks like. So that is all 4 of these zones are now set up. And we can move on to the next thing, which is defining how our shades work. So operable shades in ClimateStudio are defined in a few different ways. It's primarily based on the material, and it automatically divides the shades by orientation, so I don't have to do anything differently, say this shade and that shade there, assuming that the glass has shade associated with it. I don't have to actually divide this into separate zones, but this zone and this zone both have the same orientation and possibly different shading treatments. And so for those, I would need to create different zones. So underneath my glass, I'm going to make a few different zones here, and you'll see as we go through it, you'll see how this works out. So let's start with our skylights first. So this skylight here, I want to have the sun coming in. I don't ever want to have it with a shade on it. So I'm going to assign that to this layer, and I'm going to call that just no shade. This one, just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to create a different, I'm going to put on a different layer, and this layer I'm going to make a fixed shade. And what this means is if I go to the material for that fixed shade here, I can define a exterior glass. So I'm going to use solar band 70 with clear glass there. And then for the shade material, I'm going to pick something slightly diffusing. So how about like 5.2% VLT, and yeah, I'll do more than that. That seems low. 10% VLT, and then for the control, we're going to ignore the point in time. We're going to just use the annual control, and I want to use fixed. So it says control is inactive for annual simulations. Point in time position will be used for the entire year. So if I have this at up in point in time, it means that the shades will always be retracted. If I have this down, it means that the shades will always be deployed. If you are using a diffusing glass, this would be one way of setting it as a very low transmission diffusing glass. So this is effectively 63% times 10% is about a 6% transmissive glass. Or you have something that is like temporarily blocked out, or a fixed shade that is just fixed, which is what I'm going to model here. So that is the difference between no shade and a fixed shade. So that's it for our skylights. We also have these clerestory windows over here. So this, and this. I'm going to put all those on one layer. I'm going to call that clerestory. And for those, I know that I have some sun coming in the late evening or late afternoon. I don't know quite how much I have, but what I'm going to do is define that as an exterior glass. I'm going to use that same solar band 70 on clear. With a shade material is, I'm going to use that same 10% transmissive, but this time for the annual control, instead of fixed or manual, I'm going to set this to be automated. And what this does is it will use the sensor points that are already on the floor, and it will query those points to see if the light levels get too high, it will deploy the shades, and when the light levels drop down, it will reopen those blinds or shades. In this case, we can set that threshold. I think by default it's at 3800 lux, which is a good default for this, especially because our shades are 10% transmissive. And if we have a criteria of about 300 lux in here, that means that if light levels get to be 3800 lux, it will drop down to 380 lux, which is very close to our target. Another thing to note here is that you can set which sensors, or if there's any sensors that need to be ignored. So for example, there's a lot of cases where we would want for sensors that are right by the window to allow for a little bit of direct sun at the perimeter. And by default, it is going to say that 1.5 meters was about 5 feet or so, it's okay to have some sun in there. It's going to ignore the sensors. In our case, for this painting area, we actually don't want to it to ignore any sensors. So to enact that, this would be 1.5 by default. We set the permissible sunlight depth to be 0, essentially 0.01, to make sure that it's not ignoring any sensors. Okay, so now we've got our clerestories, our skylights, and let's look at our vertical glass here. So in the reading room, in fact, I'm gonna just move this down so we can see it. The reading room, we've got a light shelf in this area on the north side, and what I would like to do is have the shades down below be different than the shades up above, so two different sets of shades. And in order to do that, I need this to be two zones of glass. So I am going to change this glass, and I'm going to turn this clipping plane off for a second. What I want is for this glass to be split by this light shelf right in between. So let's see if I can do this. This glass is here, and I'm going to north view glass as opposed to north clerestory glass, or I'm just going to call this north window. And I am going to split this with this mullion. Let's see if this works. So now we have an upper and a lower, and actually I think we have one in the middle too. I'm going to delete that. This lower goes down into into this opaque spandrel, and I don't think that actually matters for the calculations that it's doing, so I'm going to leave it. So that lower one is the view window, and the upper one is the window. And just to make sure, this is more as a reminder to myself that I'm doing this, I'm going to make this one a different color so that I remember that there are two different blind situations. For both of these, I actually want to have the same control. So I'm going to go to the material, and I'm going to go to those two north ones. So here, I'm going to set this to be that same solar band 70 on clear. We have the same 10% shade material. And then for the shade control, I'm going to do this as manual, so someone inside the space can control this. And what ClimateStudio assumes is that when there's manual control, if more than 2% of the sensors in the room receive direct sun, then someone will close it. Now, in my experience, this is actually not what most people experience, or most people do. Usually the blinds remain shut once they once you get some sun in there, and then no one remembers to open them again. But we'll just stick with this scenario. Um, this also assumes that people will reset them, reopen them again. I think that's kind of a myth, but we'll just assume that that's actually happening for the sake of this. So that's how manual control works. Uh, because we have this light shelf, though, this manual control and this manual control should hypothetically be different. We'll see how this turns out. Hopefully I don't have to redo this tutorial. So let's see, this is I did the north view, now I need the north window. We're going to set this to be exactly the same so we can see the difference between the two. Manual. There. Okay. This one too, because this faces west, there's probably a lot of times when that would want to be have manual control on it. So I'm going to add that west window, and I'm going to do the exact same regime here. Clear, 10% manual. For this little guy, I actually don't really care if there is some sun coming in there, because if I add the library furniture here, you can see this is kind of a loungy area, and this is not going to allow that much sun in. So I'm kind of okay with some sun coming in there. So I'm not going to have any dedicated shades there. On this facade, I would definitely need some shades, and it's interesting that they're two different. I didn't realize that. Let me turn this back. Huh, look at that. I don't remember why I did that, but we will eventually. I'm going to test a few different scenarios, and we'll want to look at the scenario of the what happens with some more detailed fixed shading around this area. You'll see we're going to come back and do this in a second, but more of egg crate kind of shade here as opposed to just horizontals over here, so we can compare them. As a result, I'm going to have this be two different zones. So this zone, I'm going to scale this 1D and drag this back to here, and then I'm going to scale this to there, and I'm going to add this. So this will be south lounge and south workstations, and this is going to be the workstations, and this is going to be the lounge. And again, just to make sure I remember that these are two separate zones, I'm going to change the color. So similar to what I did over here, but now it's left and right as opposed to up and down. All right, and that is the setup for this. Oh, right, I need to define the windows for these. For both of these, I'm going to use, again, this solar band 70 and 10% shade material, and I'm going to do, over here we did manual control, so I'm going to do automated control here so we can see a little bit of a difference. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but let's see if we can keep it all straight in our heads for later. All right, this is just for demonstration purposes. In real life, it probably wouldn't be quite so complex. So now we've defined all of our different shading zones and analysis zones, and I think we're ready to press play. Make sure that you turn off any furniture that could be in the way. It also just increases the runtime, so not necessary to have it on. And then we can go ahead and start. And when it does this, it is going to take a little bit to process the geometry and do all the runs, which every point is going to look at every hour of the year. This is a faster run than the Radiance renderings because it's a little bit, it doesn't have to render everything pixel by pixel. It uses a slightly different method to come up with the results. Wow, much to my surprise, these all have very high daylight levels. So maybe I've a little bit overdone it. But in the next video, I will explain all these different results, how to interpret them, and how to output them. So I'll see you then.